death, taxes, the Connecticut Sun contending. Those are the three things we can all rely on. And Stephanie White's here to tell us why. Locked On Women's Basketball starts now.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
A very happy Tuesday to you. I am Howard Megdal, welcoming you to Locked On Women's Basketball. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. More than 200,000 of you showed up in July alone. We are on track to break our record for listenership here in August, showing up the way we show up for you 6 days a week. Make sure you're listening not just to me, but to the entire crew across the way at thenexthoops.com. We have over 100 reported pieces every single month on women's basketball, past, present, and future. We have a beat reporter covering each WNBA team. $9 a month, $72 a year. Subscribe, thenexthoops.com to support the work. And goodness knows through the years, we and before the next, I have had the privilege of covering Steph White, a legend in this game. I don't think it's too much to say across her work as a player and coach. If you'll forgive the point of personal privilege, when you were hired with the Connecticut Sun, and I am public on the record as this was an obvious home run hire. It was going to make the Sun a contender right away. Did not come as a surprise to anyone that you did. Here we are, though, once again. You guys are winning. You guys are in position to contend. I guess the place I want to start that kind of blows my mind is playing you guys last year. I had multiple coaches say to me, it was like playing in mud by defensive rating, by defensive efficiency, by different ways we're going to dig into. Your defense has been better this year than last year. Where and how have you found those improvements?
I think first and foremost, having Brianna Jones back on the floor certainly helps. She really is a quarterback, for us on the defensive end of the floor. She does a great job of communicating stuff for us. She's kind of a catch-all. She has everybody's back. It allows us to do some different things that we might not have been able to do a year ago. I think that, Dejanay is even better defensively than she was a year ago. I think Ty Harris is better. I think Veronica Burton gives us another look on the perimeter as well. I just feel like, our pieces and our team really buying into still being that defensive juggernaut, but now we have a little bit more defensive versatility, different ways that we can cover teams.
It looks like what Darius Taylor has done in terms of assembling this roster is to find more options, more alternatives for you to be able to plug into different ways over the course of the year. And yeah, we'll talk about the mid-year deal, and bringing in Marina Mabry is a very big deal specifically to the way you guys play. But you even look at some of the internal improvement before we get to those roster questions. Someone like Ty Harris, what has allowed her to take, you go across efficiency on both sides of the ball, a tremendous step forward this year?
I think two things. I think number one, opportunity, and number two, the work. Certainly last year was the first time in her career that she had been in a rotation. She had been a rotational player. So getting that experience, building that confidence, understanding the opportunity that was in front of her for this season, and taking ownership of her work habits over the course of the offseason. I mean, she was here a lot in Connecticut over the course of the offseason. She was in the weight room. She was working with Keith Porter, our development coach, player development coach, and she was getting better. And so she took advantage of the opportunity that was in front of her. The challenge, as it is for anybody who's used to coming off the bench and then getting into a starting role, is can you do it consistently? I felt like Ty hit a little bit of a wall toward the end before the break, but used this time over the course of the break and is also learning now, how do I recover? How do I make sure I make myself, as healthy and efficient as possible? That's all a growth process that comes with more opportunity.
It's a great thing to see. And again, the way it's manifested itself, what's so interesting to me is this is what I always look for, is when the volume goes up, what happens to the efficiency? And so she's shooting north of 36% from three. She's taking twice as many threes per game as she did for you last year. She's making better plays, distributing the ball, but her assist percentage has not come at the expense of her turnover percentage. She's down around 11% turnover percentage. Just absurd for somebody who has the ball in her hands that much. Was there a moment or moments that you saw early on this year, you saw her put in the work, like you talked about, where you saw, oh, I now see it's paying off. There's a different level for us?
I don't know if there was a moment where I saw it. I expected it, certainly. I think that she didn't play overseas in the off season. She really worked on her game. She really worked on getting healthy. So there was a little bit of getting into that game shape and flow and rhythm the first few games of the season. But once she did, she just took off. And now it becomes, she's a scoring point guard, right? So she's different than Veronica Burton, who's more of a facilitating point guard. So for us now, it's how do we maintain, our ability to score the basketball in multiple ways. Number one, I still think that she passes up too many threes. I know that she's taken more than she did a year ago, but she's still passing up a lot. And number two, then managing the game and finding her teammates. There are more options for her now with Marina on the floor as well. So I think that's the next step in, really studying the game and managing and understanding, if I don't have my option, where am I going to next? I think that's just the next step for her.
What you want to take in what? You think 5 or 6 threes a game? Is that where you want her to get to?
Yeah, for sure. I want her taking anyone that she catches after an action has happened and she's open. I want her shooting it. I feel like she passes up opportunities on the second and third side when the ball has gone, whether it's inside or whether it's been a dribble attack on a kick. I feel like sometimes she passes up opportunities waiting for a screen when she's got shot opportunities right away. And so I think each game is different depending upon how they're playing our personnel, but certainly with Marina on the floor, more of those opportunities are coming her way. And so I want to make sure that she capitalizes on them.
It's so interesting you say that. And I want to get to Marina too. And we'll talk more about that and that move in segment 2. But you mentioned Dejanay Carrington. We have to talk about Dejanay's, it's almost like a revolution as a player to me, as much, not about the fact that we're seeing her flash those skills, but as you know, when you're looking in scout and you see somebody flash and you say, oh, she can do that all the time. But it seems the consistency that we're seeing out of her at the defensive end. Where is that coming from? Is that a scheme? Is that just, growing into who she is as a player? How do you account for it?
I think it's a combination of both. She took the more traditional route of, being a player that comes off the bench, working her way into a rotation. She was in contention for 6th player of the year last year before she had some of those injuries. And then knowing that there was an opportunity to step in the starting lineup when Tiffany Hayes retired. So I think taking ownership of it. And that's one of the conversations that we had before the season is now you have to do what you did in spurts coming off the bench consistently throughout the course of the game. Certainly, we are depending on her to be a lockdown defender for us, to guard the opponent's best perimeter player. And early in the year, that was kind of her focus as she found her offense. And I think we hit about, probably mid-June to the end of June. And she really started finding that balance of her ability to score in our half-court offense, not just in transition, and while consistently locking down the opponent's best perimeter player. And that's something that we need from her. We really don't have anyone on our team that can get downhill the way that she does. And then it becomes getting downhill and becoming not just a finisher at the rim or getting to the foul line, but now a facilitator. The next step for Dejanay is her decision-making once she does get into the paint. I think hers is more of a natural progression. And when opportunity presented itself, taking it and running with it and not giving it away. I think that she's certainly a front runner in my mind. I know I'm biased for most improved player. I think she should be in contention for first team all defensive player. And I know we get locked into blocks and steals for defensive player of the year. But if we look at her numbers and what she's doing to opponents' best perimeter players when she's the matchup, she's holding them well below their averages and field goal percentage and points and all of those things. So, I think that, I'm really proud of her progression. I'm really proud of the way that she's continued to develop.
Watching her beaming after opening night when she was defending Caitlin Clark and, shutting her down. It was not a one-off. It was what she's been doing to opponents all year. She's obviously relished that role. When you talk to her about being a starter, how how much pleasure did you get out of that conversation? What do you remember from that moment? Because she clearly enjoying the elevated opportunity.
I remember two things. One, I did have concerns not about starting her, but more about where we get the energy from the bench, right? Because she changes the dynamic of the game with her energy. And that as a coach, like that is really important to have off the bench. Oftentimes, if your starters aren't starting the game really well, you need somebody who can come in and give it a punch. And so that was a concern for me. So I just told her that, like, you're in the starting lineup, but I also have a concern about how we look, with someone coming off the bench. But she gave me no choice. I mean, she's really just taking it and running with it. Again, I'm really proud of her taking advantage of the opportunity. And you mentioned it, relishing the role. There are very few players who relish the role of being a lockdown defender, who embrace it, who love the challenge. It's dirty. It's hard, dirty work, right? You're going to be run through the ringer with screens. You're going to be required to make multiple coverages. Like, you can't make mistakes when you're guarding. And I think that the thing that I am most proud of is that she does relish that role. She is disappointed if there's a breakdown. She's competitive, to the point where she is a perfectionist on the defensive end of the floor. And it's been necessary for us because we didn't have that person. And so it's been necessary for us to have that for long periods of time. And she's continued to step up to that challenge.
It's been remarkable to see. She may be the best perimeter defender in the league at this point.
I agree.
It's a fascinating way forward for her. Well, lots more to get to in segment 2 with Stephanie White, head coach of the Connecticut Sun. I'm Howard Megdal. You're listening to Locked On Women's Basketball. Locked On Women's Basketball is brought to you by Game Time. And so when I am not covering the WNBA, I am taking one or the other of my children, oftentimes both, to other games, to concerts, you name it. And that's where Game Time really comes in and is very helpful and convenient for us, because my children have a very specific way. My younger daughter, when she comes to a basketball game to watch, she wants to be able to see the bigs, to be able to learn from them and take notes. And so what is the 360 view from our seat? Well, Game Time doesn't just tell you where you're sitting, but they give you the view of where you're doing it. Plenty of things that go along with it. They have curated deals to make it easier to find the best price, last minute pricing as well, and the lowest price guarantee. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if they aren't the lowest price. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off with Game Time. Back with Stephanie White, and lowest price guarantee is one thing, but man, it was impossible to get in to TD Garden. Seeing you guys with a sellout crowd, performing so well for the fans, going out and getting a win. And I've seen a lot of conversation about it being, this could be New England's team. And I just wonder how much you have felt that during your tenure there, how much it feels like, in the same way that Boston Red Sox have Red Sox Nation and have really become that in Major League Baseball, whether the Sun can get there, and related to it, how much winning a championship you think can help fuel such an effort.
Yeah, it's interesting because until that experience in the Garden and just all of the events around the game in Boston, I think I felt more like we're Connecticut's team, right, than New England's team. And so, to not really know where we stood in terms of the greater New England area. And when we kept hearing about the crowd and the potential sellout and all of the events that were surrounded and the way that we were embraced, by the extended community, it started to feel like New England's team. And New England has a rich sports tradition. Fans of all sports, football, and of course the NBA, the baseball, like college sports, all of it, right? So for us to continue to expand our footprint, to be able to bring people over to our arena for games, to be able to have, whether it's families, children, adults, business folks, like potential sponsors who have never been to a WNBA game, to experience that and know that we are just down the road. was important for us. And we have always said, Howard, in women's basketball, it's like, it just takes us, just get there, right? It just takes us one time. If we get you there, you're going to be invested. You're going to be invested in the team. You're going to be invested in a certain player. You're going to be invested then in the game. And I felt like having our game in the Garden gave us an opportunity to do that. The fans were amazing. It was an ugly game, but we found a way to win it down the stretch. But I'm still just getting chills just talking about it. To play in front of 19,000 fans in the Garden was just an incredible experience.
It was remarkable. I was delighted. We had Gabby Appleby there, our Connecticut Sun beat reporter. She was able to take people inside the sights and sounds, the feelings of it. But, to me, even bigger, like you said, there's part of this overall larger moment. And, I guess I wonder how gratifying it is as a lifelong acolyte of Lynn Dunn to see the part that the Indiana Fever are playing too in that. I know, obviously, when you guys want, play Indiana, you want to beat them when it comes out there. But just, to know, given your history with that franchise and your history with Lynn specifically, how much pleasure you get out of seeing that happen, specifically in Indiana too.
I do. I mean, certainly in Indiana, it's my home state, and seeing the fans back in the building, for the Fever is important. It's gratifying, certainly, because Indiana is the basketball state, and I'm happy that the organization is sort of revitalized. Obviously proud of Lynn and what she's done, and Tamika and what she did to help, build it to where it is, certainly. And now this next generation of players taking it over. But even on the greater scale, the league in general. I mean, I've been a part of this league for 25 years as a player and a coach, and to see, where we were from the infancy, where we had great fan support, to, then kind of hitting a little bit of a lull, and where we are finally connecting the college fan to the WNBA. We have star power. We have engagement on social media platforms in ways that we haven't had before. And all that builds connection with our fans. And when we have connection with our fans, when we have a vested interest, and certainly, I feel like during the pandemic, it helped because people were at home. Oftentimes that's what we struggled with in the summertime. People aren't at home. They're out, they're on vacation. They're doing all of these things, right? And so awareness of WNBA and WNBA games wasn't there. The pandemic happens, they're at home. They don't have anything to do except for watch. And again, we get you one time and you're going to be invested. I think that started some momentum, and now we're at the perfect storm, so to speak. So to see where we were and where we are now, and selling out NBA arenas, the fan engagement, the players taking ownership of it. The game is as good as it's ever been. The players are as good as they've ever been. That is incredibly exciting and gratifying.
I will just say, I think of TD Garden as a WNBA arena that the Celtics play in now. That's just sort of the way I've
I love that.
Yeah. But to your point about this, and again, it comes back to, we're going to talk Marine in segment 3, but I want to stay on this for a second, because when I said you were the right hire at the right time in Connecticut, in my mind, it's you understand how to get to a championship. For listeners at home, I assume you know, but if you don't know, Stephanie White is an NCAA champion as a player. You were as an assistant to Lynn. You guys won in Indiana. I covered you in the finals in 2015, going back there as a head coach. So you have done this again and again. And while Connecticut has been consistently among the best, that's sort of that one remaining jump to make. They were so close. I saw them with a lead in the third quarter in the 2019 WNBA Finals Game 5. It's been right there. And my question for you, I guess, is where and how is that gap able to be jumped for this team? And do you see this team as having the capability to do it?
I think a couple of things. Certainly it always takes a little bit of luck, right? You gotta stay healthy. You got to hit your stride. It's about momentum at the right time. It's about matchups in the playoffs. It's about all of those things. But it's also about being able to be flexible and adjust. You can't do the same things to teams in a series in the playoffs that you did to them in a regular season game that was, a week or two or 3 weeks apart. You just can't. So you've got to number one, have multiple ways that you can not just defend but attack. To have players who buy into that. Why are we changing? It's not necessarily because something is good or bad. It's to keep teams off balance, right? It's to give different looks. It's to not be predictable. You got to try to stay ahead of the curve. And then it comes down to players making plays and having multiple players on the floor that you can go to. So I do think that, especially with the addition of Marina, it takes some pressure off of especially DB when she's a player who we ran a lot of stuff for to get shots. Now we have another player on the floor that can be a playmaker, that can be a shot maker, that can be a tough shot maker, that has that mentality, that toughness that we have here in Connecticut, that's not afraid of anybody, that's competitive as all get out. But it also is another floor spacer on the floor for us and another go-to on the offensive end. And that's really where we've had our biggest growth edge is we have to get better on the offensive end of the floor. Our defense is always giving us a chance to win ball games. We've got to get better. We've got to get more unpredictable. We've got to get more in flow. We've got to get more balance. We got to get to playing faster on the offensive end of the floor. And adding that piece, I think gets us over the hump to talking about, winning a championship, not just being a championship contender.
It's absolutely agree with everything you just said. And back with final thoughts on Marina and a little bit more right after this. But first, Locked On Women's Basketball is brought to you by FanDuel. And FanDuel has an opportunity, or you might say an opportunity for suffering if you are a family of New York Giants fans like we are. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So my family will get to sit around the TV and watch the Giants probably get absolutely demolished by the Minnesota Vikings. It's just part of how we spend Sundays in the fall as Giants fans. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to visit America's #1 sportsbook. Yeah, gonna be a rough time for the Giants.
Yeah, that sounds a little brutal.
It's going to be, but we're loyal. We're loyal. What can I say? So back with Stephanie White, head coach of the Connecticut Sun, and we were talking about Marina Mabrey prior to this. It was, again, opportunistic is sort of the way I would describe the way in which Darius Taylor has helped to put this roster together. It wasn't necessarily the case that Marina was going to be available during the offseason or early in the season, but when she comes up as a potential player for you to come in and get not only additional shooting, but somebody who is this true two-way player who can defend as well. How significant was that for you? Knowing that she's someone who can continue to implement what you guys are able to do defensively while providing that extra spacing.
It was huge. It really was. Certainly we needed another shot maker. There's no doubt about that. Somebody that could space the floor. Our 3-point shooting numbers were not where they need to be to compete for a championship. And she gives us versatility on the defensive end of the floor. She's big, she's tough, she's got great instincts. It's now she's in a defensive system, right? That understanding, what it takes, understanding our coverages, understanding playing with multiple levels of effort, understanding that we value it in a different way. And so for her, I think that she was a perfect fit for us. I hope we were a perfect fit for her. It's about now finding our rotations, finding opportunities to get her high quality shots and high quality playmaking abilities. Her instincts are just something that you can't teach. She knows how to play. She's on time, on target when she's delivering passes. You think every shot that she takes is going to go in. She's somebody who is elite at the end of shot clock and shooting toughly contested shots, low percentage shots for a lot of people that she makes. And so we needed that. We needed another weapon, and it was, you're right. I mean, Darius, what an outstanding job he did. Certainly hated losing the players that we lost in Mo and Rachel. But at the same time, to compete for a championship and understanding that the window is closing, getting Marina Mabrey was huge for us. And now we have an opportunity to continue to work to be playing our best basketball on both ends as we head into the playoffs.
I mean, New Jersey's own Marina Mabrey always good to see her getting this opportunity. And like you said, with, having DeWanna Bonner, I just, how does she not age? It's just the most amazing thing to me. I know we need to figure it out, but I also just, I wonder whether you think this also is not just in Marina, somebody who can playmate for you, but that broken play, in the playoffs. There's so much will happen near the end of the shot clock. In your mind, you view her as sort of an option for that, the way DB has primarily been?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of our off-ball actions, I mean, certainly we have Ty who can play in the two-man, and we have Nate who can get downhill, and we've been running a lot of off-ball screening actions for DB. And yes, while DB has continued to find the fountain of youth, she's still 15 years into the league, and having to have, her do what she's doing, playing 30-plus minutes, it's not sustainable. So now you can add Marina into that mix, and she can play multiple positions. She can be somebody. Now we've got two shooters coming off of different screens. So it opens things up, not just for them, but now it's opening up driving lanes for AT. Now it's opening up post-up opportunities or slip opportunities for Breezy. It just makes everyone else's life easier because we're able to work smarter instead of working harder because we have different options.
Just been fascinating to see. And Stephanie, we could talk all day, but we can't because you have a bus to catch. But I appreciate your time. Our listeners do as well. To our listeners, I thank you for making us your first listen every day. We will be back with you tomorrow talking about the magic of Satu Sabali and exactly how she goes about creating out of the forward position like a certain Alyssa Thomas that you all might be familiar with. So until then, I am Howard Megdal, wishing all of you a wonderful Tuesday.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.